All right, so we'll just dive into the opportunities for agendas for future meetings and workshops. I'm not going to repeat what I shared earlier. This is a chance for, obviously you guys to provide feedback on that list, of which I could review it again to refresh your memories. But otherwise, I think it's important for us as the city administration and for you all to really come together and say, what are the things that we want to tackle, what are the issues that we want to take on, and that way we'll start formulating an agenda for the year going forward.
Okay. My comment, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but you had mentioned performance measures, and I had a few questions. I don't think we've been formally introduced to that concept on what impact they may have on future pay for staff, if they will have an impact. If we're going to measure performance, there's some end game to that measurement, and presumably a consequence. So if we are going to have a kind of a performance measure in place, I want to know if there's going to be something punitive or how that will impact decision-making when it comes to times at budget to allocate pay increases. So is that baked into it? And if so, can you put that as a discussion point if that is your intent on implementing performance measures that you've worked out with the auditor?
So here's the gist of it. The short version is yes, that sounds fine for what you're asking. In response to your question, the performance measures was mentioned that are what I'm going to talk about with staff. We first need to share this with all the staff. We haven't had that opportunity yet. We'll do that on the 21st with everything else. And it's just out of respect of Ted and I and some of the management team members. We've been doing this. I've been putting a lot of time into it personally. We've had the auditor and everything else. So we need to roll this out first comprehensively internally, get feedback, and then we need to look at knitting all this together from job descriptions, performance evaluations, performance measures. And there's two kinds, because we want where we're going as a city on an operational level, how we get work done, to all be integrated with the individual employment descriptions, the work plans that I'm asking departments to establish. At the same time, we want there to be a nexus to the boards and commissions that we have, because just for transparency's sake, and this is something that I asked for at the end of last year, and I expect for this year, that we'll have each of our boards come forward on a regular, predetermined basis to provide an update on parks, provide an update on tourism, to have some goals and share that. So that way we're all on the same page and we can plan for it. So, long story short, I'm going to do that internally. We're going to roll it out. As we get to this point of the rollout, if there are any adjustments that would need to be made, it would need to be made to our personnel policies and procedures manual, which would be something that council would review and visit. We're not there yet. And so I've noted it as something to flag. We've got still a ways to go with this. I mean, this is a comprehensive organizational cultural change. But I hear what you're saying. The appropriate way to do that is through the policies and procedures manual. And when we get to that point, I can just keep updating you guys on where we're at. But the next step is the 21st. The other thing that's important to note, and I know there were comments or questions made about a specific employee at a previous meeting, and I clarified that what we're doing is it relates to exempt staff and exempt staff only, because the approach for having integrated systems and priorities and performance measures and personnel agreements and everything else, once we step into that union realm, this is why it's important to go slow and go fast. All that stuff has to be negotiated and bargained. And so, like Amy Walker on our recreation staff, her name gets mentioned a lot. She's a member of the union. So you have public works, you have the police, you have the fire, and by public works, I mean the DuPont Employees Association. And so there's a nexus to any of these conversations that would have to take place as part of the union negotiations that we have scheduled for the first half of this year. So lots of moving parts. I hear you, and I think it's something to just flag and revisit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So can we just add for whoever's tracking this, just as a flag, the personnel policies and procedures manual to give an update on when we get to that point. Councilman reports.
Brings us to new business. This is the proposal that we've talked about a couple times before council regarding a biennial budget ordinance. This is the second reading, and as we've talked about before, it's great that we do an annual budget. Everybody has to do one. it takes up an extensive amount of time for us, about 6 months out of the year. And as we all share, council and myself, there's other priorities that we have. And instead of going through a budget and looking at things on an annual basis, I've urged us to take a more long-term approach. That's why we've initiated doing a long-term revenue forecast. Again, moving from doing an annual revenue forecast, which is not that helpful or that smart, to doing a long-term revenue forecast, which is 6 years. We initiated this last year and we've implemented it and we're providing regular updates. Now the proposal is to move from doing a budget on every year basis, which is a big time commitment, to moving it towards doing a 2-year budget. The goal is to be more effective and more efficient use of time, as well as to free up the resources of the staff and as well as the council and myself, so that we can focus on some of those other policy priorities that we have, whilst at the same time ensuring the same oversight and accountability, which is actually required by law if we move in this direction, which is what I'm recommending. So Sandy, why don't you walk us through the briefing document, your PowerPoint. I know Councilmember Wesson, he was talking about getting testimonials and he wanted to Skype with people. I don't know if he did that or not, but we, as I shared with you, have actually been talking with folks, and Sandy can walk through how she got some testimonials from people from a pretty creative way, and we have that here for you in our plans. Sandy?
Sure.
Let me just go through it here.
Precise. So background, as we mentioned before, the biennial, per state law, biennial budgets have to start in an odd numbered year. So this would be our first opportunity would be to create the 2015 and 2016 budget this year during 2014, which is the recommendation that we're obviously discussing.
Because if we don't do it now, the only other time to do this would be waiting until 2017.
Some benefits of biennial budgeting, staff and council time savings, only having to prepare a full budget once every 2 years. There is the mid-buy review and update during the latter part of the first year of the biennial, but you're not starting early having to do a full line-by-line projection and staffing. Basically, you do most of your projections on 2 years and then update and tweak where is necessary. And then the off year can be used then for the policy work and strategic planning efforts and other priority projects such as either business process improvements or policy type work. Not twice the effort. There's additional effort to be able to do, obviously, you're doing 2 projections instead of 1, but you're not recreating all of the forms and such, and having basically, it's not a full doubling of effort by either the finance staff, the department staff, or the council, because the council is then reviewing 2 years at once. So many of the line items are consistent from year to year, and we're only looking at kind of the change line items. And it also encourages longer-term thinking and planning, so it connects with the best practices by the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, connects with the long-range forecast tool that we've implemented, as the mayor suggested. And as many of the comments that I heard when I spoke with people, instead of just doing the math exercise of balancing your budget each year, you're actually looking more strategically forward. Along with that, of course, there are some challenges. So the first year when you switch, which would be this year, then there is some kind of extra effort just because we're creating and updating forms for staff to be able to do a 2-year projection, but then you have that 2-year kind of format and template moving forward. Some training on staff to maybe do some of those projections, and budget document changes in order to make the historical comparisons for the council and public. And one of the things
I think
here,
the other thing that we heard from folks was, in addition to the challenges, I mean, it's change, and change is tough. And like we heard last time from Councilmember Westman and Councilmember Coffey, it's not the old way that we're used to doing it. I got it, for those of you that are around. But from my perspective, it's important to look long-term, to be more strategic, to be more effective, and be more efficient. And that change is tough, and we'll get through it. And the heaviest burden of that will be carried by Sandy as we do that transition. But I think all of us will benefit from taking a more long-term strategic approach, which is what we all want.
And then one of the challenges that we did here was that and it was from some of the agencies that actually had gone to Biennial and back, was that there was either a perception or a feeling of a loss of control. Just because you're looking 2 years out, and now we've made that plan, and they'll put those numbers on paper, and 2 years out, and loss of control over that. And a lot of that then is solved, I believe, through the agencies, and so whatever our process would be as far as updates. Right now we do the quarterly budget updates. We try and bring council a mid-year budget update, updates of forecast, and as required, you would have to do your mid-biennial review update to look at that second year and adjust it. So the council would still have many opportunities to be able to adjust the budget. Staff would be continuing to monitor the revenues and the expenditures and making those recommendations for the council for adjustment, the same as if we were on an annual. It just would be more forward-looking and making those for the first year of the biennial, but also looking how does that impact. So if we make a change, if something happens and we need to make a change, we would be seeing what would be the impact going forward. So not just only focusing on that 1 year, but looking longer term and saying, okay, what is the impact, increase or decrease for both the revenue or expenditure from a longer term standpoint?
It encourages, and I think Councilmember Gorski brought this up last time, it encourages us to be proactive, but it also allows us to be reactive in case things come up.
As several of the council members, from what I heard at the last discussion of this, was kind of, well, let's get some, we want some feedback and some research and some testimonials from other agencies. Councilmember Westman also had talked about contacting the City of Walla Walla, as they had a system that did biennial budgeting. So I reached out and talked with Jean Teasdale, who's the finance manager at the City of Walla Walla. The software system that they use is called Eden. It's one that many other cities use. And it has a component called advanced budgeting, I believe, where it allows them to kind of do 2 years. They also still prepare their budget as kind of the recommendation that we've talked about, which is you prepare 2 annual budgets, basically combine those together, and the council adopts 1 2-year appropriation. But there's just a function within their financial software that allows them kind of to put those 2 budgets in and use it as somewhat of a what-if scenario to plan with. We have our financial software is called Springbrook. It's not Eden, but within the Springbrook system, there's an extended budgeting module. I believe, based on talking with Ms. Teasdale at City of Walla Walla, it's some of the same function that you can do, basically scenario building and forecasting, kind of, applying percentage increases and those such of things. So we would have some of the probably same capabilities. But again, most cities, either one when I worked at the City of Kirkland or either one that I've talked to, when they adopt 2 annual budgets, most software systems are all built on an annual basis. It's then on the reporting end, does a system allow you to report out on that 2-year basis and do how does it do the comparisons for revenue received and expenditures spent? But most systems will build it on an annual basis, and then we would just combine it to adopt as a 2-year. I won't read these for line, but many of the comments from the testimonials were the same for both the positives and the negatives for biennial budgeting. In Walla Walla, they do strategic planning in their off year, easier to maintain control of the spending, they felt, by creating the annual budgets and then adopting it. In Walla Walla, they did talk a little bit about the forecasting being a little tougher, mostly just because of the recession for these last couple of years. I spoke with Mike Bailey, the finance director for City of Redmond. He's also the author of the report that we passed out previously. Mr. Bailey has done and kind of instituted biennial budgeting at several cities that he worked for. City of Linwood, Redmond did already have it, and City of Renton was another one where he instituted biennial budgeting. So he's listed a few of his reasons: the perspective to a longer view, saving time and flexibility within managing the budget. And then reasons to stay with the annual budget. It does require a little more sophistication in your systems and forecasting, and that if you don't use your mid-biennial process as a tune-up and you recreate a full budget process, then it's not going to save you any time, and so yes, it's not going to be worth your while to go to a biennial if you just recreate a whole budget process at that mid-buy. So setting up the policies and the expectations would be really important at that point. Couple other testimonials. I did receive 2 from City of Kirkland when I reached out. Neil Cruz is a senior financial analyst, and Marilyn Beard, which would be on the next slide, is assistant city manager. Both were there during the tenure when I was there as well. And repeated some of the same. They do a lot of business process improvements in the off years. Kirkland also does their capital improvement program. They have a 6-year capital improvement program. They do that in their off year. And it reduces the need to produce a full budget document each and every year, which saves a lot of time. And I believe one of the, Marilyn Beard at City of Kirkland pointed out one of the maybe negatives going with is if you have, it's starting during a time of fiscal stress is not the time. So several years ago when the city was having the problems through the recession was not the time to go to a biennial budget. But as we've seen through the forecast, DuPont's in a much more stable space now, much more sustainable place, looking at the forecast going forward. So we've kind of recovered from that recession and wouldn't be considered in fiscal stress anymore, and would be a good time. The last testimonial is from Sri Krishnan, who's the finance director at the Alderwood Water and Wastewater District. Some of the comments from him allows more time to focus and implement on performance measurement and more time to spend on reporting results and metrics. So you have that extra time then to actually report back on how you're doing and to measure how you're doing versus always in the development and creating stages. One of the outstanding issues would be somewhat our staff recommendation to create 2 annual budgets for internal planning purposes and then have that adopted as a 2-year appropriation by council. But the other alternative is to create 2 annual budgets and adopt it as 2 annual budgets. This issue will impact how we do the forms and how we set up the system and how we create the documents. So that is why it's an important issue. And then the next couple slides, I just wanted to lay out somewhat kind of how the business cycle would be. For 2014 this year, obviously July, August, if given council's approval, we would kick off. We've already discussed with the department heads and the departments. They know budget's coming. They know they're working on their revenue projections and expenditure projections. At this point, they're just waiting to hear whether they have to do it for 1 year or 2 years. So that would continue. We would provide a mid-year budget review probably during August sometime. July through September, then we would be doing the basic budget preparation, review meetings with the mayor and city administrator. There would be a public hearing on revenue. In October, the mayor's proposed budget would be coming out, and then council spends October and November doing their study sessions. And in December, the council would adopt the 2015 and 2016 budget, and then only adopt the 2015 property tax levy. So the tax levy still have to be adopted on an annual basis, even though you would project the revenue for 2 years. You have to adopt them on an annual basis per state law. Into 2015, the business cycle, like March, we would be looking at the carryover request from the 2014 budget, like we do now, through that kind of first quarter budget adjustment. June, we would do a kind of a mid-year budget review and a forecast update. Getting council's direction on anything that they would like to see at the mid-buy process. And then that September through November timeframe is when you're not allowed to start your mid-buy process earlier than September by state law. So September through November, sometime during there, we would be doing the mid-buy update process, looking at any estimates, how 2015 is doing, 2016, making any other adjustments for grants and so forth. And then there's a required public hearing for that mid-buy process as well. And then in December, adopting any mid-biennial adjustments, and then adopting your 2016 property tax levy would be kind of how the cycle would go. I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Any questions for Sandy? If not, we could make a motion a second and go into discussion to discuss this item. I know many of you said you wanted to do some research and talk to people and look at that. So, any initial questions or else a motion would be in order? Question? Motion? Motion's been made by Councilmember Ford, seconded by Councilmember Coffey. Discussion? Councilmember Coffey.
Speaking to the 2 one-year budgets or the 1 2-year budget, how do you feel is the best way to do that, since you have been through that process?
My feeling and my recommendation is to adopt as a 2-year appropriation. You're trying to move to a 2-year budget and try and move to that longer-term strategic look. So I believe adopting the budget as a true biennial budget allows you that flexibility to be able to spend within that 2-year appropriation. You're obviously going to make adjustments and and set controls and limit on, as you would, whether it was annual or not, as far as how much departments, could spend within that 2-year appropriation, but allows you the flexibility a little bit more with the 2-year appropriation.
So the expectation would be that they would be spreading out their expenditures over the 2-year period, so that...
Yes, because they would be creating 2 annual budgets. A lot of times you still manage to those kind of 2 annual budgets, but you have the flexibility of the appropriation then to move something up given a certain circumstance, or carry over kind of, move to the second year and savings, if you want to call it, from your first year. Gives you a little bit more flexibility. But within the kind of daily operations, departments usually still manage within kind of on an annual basis look to it.
Thank you.
Any questions, council reports?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sandy, I appreciate the work you did in the background material. It's consistent with the majority of what I heard at the AWC conference, and I support this. The area, it's not a reservation I have, it's more of there's a couple thoughts I have if we go forward with this. One, I think I would speak for most council members that there might be a recession again someday. We might have things happen that are unforecasted. The fact that we are on the backside of this one is good news, but that doesn't mean that we won't ever have one again. And in my own mind, I want to make sure that the mid-buy process allows us flexibility. If we have a fundamental change in the economic climate, not just tweaking around the edges, we're going to water more here or do this, or some minor things that are necessary, but not substantive. Previous councils and mayors had to go through some pretty substantive changes in this city, and I want to make sure that this process, if required, allows us to do it. And the other part, I guess, would be directed more at the staff piece of this. Part of it's communication from the council, the mayor, and the staff, and I think we kind of walked through that this year. But when you lay something out for 2 years, last year we did some things that were hard, particularly with our landscaping in the city. It was all a cost-saving measure. But we actually had some flexibility last year that the council didn't know about. And we didn't really learn that until late in the budget cycle that, wow, we could have adjusted something 3-4 months ago. I don't want to find out that I could have adjusted something 18 months ago. And so somewhere within this scope, and I think this will be probably Ted, you and the staff, triggers, internal triggers, whether it's a 5% variance, a 10% variance. I don't know what the right answer is, but somewhere there's got to be some internal staff mechanisms that say, okay, raise the yellow card, raise the red card, the conditions have changed, and let's talk about those before we're 5 miles down the road. So I like the goodness of a 2-year budget process. I think it will allow us to become more visionary in how we look at things and take some of the curves out of the road a bit. But there's actually some of those curves are necessary. And so if we lose the ability to drive around an obstacle in a budgetary sense, then that's a bad thing. And that is going to require a bit of agility and thoughtfulness on behalf of the staff, because you see things quicker than the council sees things and have the expertise. So that would be my sensitivity, that within our staff structure of professionals, we build in those safety mechanisms to alert us if there's going to be changes.
And I'll let Sandy answer your question, but I just also want to emphasize that this also doesn't change, the lessons learned from last time when we implemented the long-term forecast. We said we're going to regularly come back every quarter and provide that information, which is something new that we haven't done before. And so this process will build on those new practices, processes. Sandy?
Yes, I would echo that. I think moving forward, especially based on last year, I think we're starting to look at implementing some of those, you could say, trigger points or those kind of mechanisms to either alert council or bring it forward in more reporting updates and format. And so I don't think we lose any of that with going to biennial budget. I think we would be doing that whether we stayed on an annual or not. And so so that will just enhance, if you go to a biennial, that will just be part of that. But we don't lose any flexibility to do that as going to a biennial.
And also in that regard, I mean, just to look at this issue fully and transparently, I mean, there was a management issue in how the resources were managed, and management has been changed and modified, and in my perspective, I think enhanced, and so that's also something to factor into this. Councilmember Borski?
Thank you. I still have reservations solely on the fact that how fast this is transpiring. I mean, it's not like a biennial budget was event last Thursday. I mean, we've known about biennial budgets for quite a while, but now we're so enthusiastic about making a fundamental change to the way we do this. I still want to kind of slow things down and have a little bit more of a discussion. But one point that was brought up that was very interesting, and it's kind of been gnawing at me, is two words, metrics and performance measurements, or 2 points. We've heard a lot about that here, but we just haven't seen it. We talked about that in Q1. We talked about it in January at our first workshop. But we've never been really formally briefed on what that looks like as council. And we are told more or less that it's in place, but what does that look like? And that's going to be really incumbent on the staff, for the city administrator and the mayor to provide back to us. I don't even know what we were measuring as a metric for finance, for health of departments, for what our department heads are doing. That's something that's still a big question mark, at least in my mind as a council member, that it is critical that if you're going to go and forecast and have a 2-year plan, that you're actually measuring something, that you know where that decision point is, and as Councilman Court said, or yellow card, red card, when do you get engaged? And if we don't have that plan formalized, communicated, and understood by council, then I'm not comfortable at all to go to a biannual budget, let alone talking about what we do on day-to-day at these meetings. So I have some trepidation about going to a biannual budget, one, because this is a second reading and consecutive meeting with a meeting canceled in between. I feel that that's kind of been sold, that it's a do or die, and I don't think that's the case. I know that there's a time pressure here, but we should have thought about that as an executive portion a year or 2 years ago. I mean, it's always been an option, but only now we're enthusiastic about it, and now we're going to have to live with that because we make that decision with a five-member council tonight. I don't think that's wise. But I'm really kind of caught up on the metrics and performance measurements. If we don't know what our departments are doing, or what our expectation is, the community and council of these departments, and how we're measuring that and how we're going to improve that, that's a big stumbling block for me. The other point would be is the other thing we discussed that isn't really mentioned is us purchasing as a city a software suite where we can have a little bit more control and visibility for ourselves and the community on these longer term projections. I think a lot of the members of the community still are kind of scarred over the recession, not just on this from the city's reaction to it, but on their own personal finances. So I wouldn't consider that this, other than maybe the city's looking a little bit better. I'm not saying that all the community members feel the same way. So I'm a little bit, I'm torn, because in the concept I do like the idea of a biennial budget, but I don't like the fact that it's got to be pushed, it's got to be this meeting, it's got to be done. And now you have 5 people voting on it, and 2 people, one has experience in a background with budgets, and another one with Councilman Trotter having a background in accounting. So, I would table it. But, I know time is of the essence, but, that should have been thought of a year ago. If this was going to be such a great time savior and the answer to a lot of things, I support that, but we never were told what the measurements and the metrics were in the community. We don't know. I mean, it was brought up, like I mentioned, I think it was in the first workshop we had. And it was asked that was presented, and it's never been put on the agenda, it's never been pushed forward. So I don't know what anyone's measuring in this town as far as what by department basis looks like. So, I probably would be voting no if it came up to a vote tonight.
Well, just to follow up, it is up for a vote tonight. This is the I think the third time that we've discussed it. I highlighted and gave this to the informational interview we had on first reading, and this is now the second reading, if I'm not correct. Yep, second reading. And so this is the third time that we've talked about it. Regarding the data and the systems, just like I told Councilmember Westman last week when he brought that up, they're two totally separate things. We are having conversations with those folks. In fact, there was one group that Councilmember Westman and myself and Courts and Penny were all interested in, as far as working with them to actually mine and extract data and present it in different formats. We're having those meetings with those folks right now. When the decision is ready, either I will make it because it's within my spending authority, or if it's something that council would really like to have a groupthink conversation about, I'd be glad to share it with you. It is definitely the direction that we're moving in. We will have something in place, but it's separate from making this decision. Regarding the time frame, Sandy can tell you, and she's probably just wincing at your words of, this is something that should have been talked about a long time ago. This is something that I mentioned I wanted to do day one, because the way we've done budgeting just does not make sense. And as a council member and as an outside observer, to take that short-term annual perspective, it drives me nuts. And she's been saying forever, wait and wait and wait, and then now, this is the year that we can do that. And the time constraints is we have to adopt it, early enough in advance to actually start the process. And so that's where we're at today. As far as for management and performance measures and things of that sort, it's ironic you guys have an email in your inbox from me. Don't get out your electronic devices because we can't do that now. But when you go home, look at it and give me a call, because what it talks about is it reminds everyone that it's going to take time to change the past performance and the operations and the culture of City Hall. But when I came in, I reached out to the auditor, the state auditor's office, and I asked him for help. And their auditor's office, their local government performance management center, came in and said, okay, we'll do an audit, which is what I asked. And they said, okay, here's where you guys are good at collecting data, here's where you're poor, here's where your performance measures are good, here's where they are poor. And then they looked at the strategic plan that was adopted by council, and they said, okay, need to make some improvements there. Need to look at how you improve and collect data. And then on top of that, there was issues implementing the transition from establishing performance measures. We now have Ted, and he's charged with that. That was one of the many reasons why he was hired to do this, to lead this cultural change. And then now we're looking at doing an organizational assessment to figure out, okay, where are there gaps in our structures and our systems and how to move it forward. And so we're taking a phased approach to improving organizational effectiveness, of which this is a part of that. But to dive deep into the performance measures, I've actually asked someone to reach out and spend individual time with every council member, have confidential conversations about what are the issues with the management systems, the structures, the culture, and everything else, and make those improvements. So this is one part of a comprehensive change that takes time, and I appreciate, and as you and I talked about, I value your perspective and passion for this, and I think by all of us focusing on this comprehensively, we can achieve that change that we want. This is related to, but it's also separate from those things. And so this is a key component, and yeah, time is important because we have to make the adoption and advance it forward. And like I said, Sandy's probably wincing because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and it is a change from doing business as usual, and I know that that's tough, but I think it's important for us to do to keep moving forward.
Can I get one comment, please?
Yeah.
We asked you specifically to give us an update on the performance metrics, which you touted at that first meeting that were, I got the impression, and anyone else can correct me if I'm wrong, that they were actually complete. So that what we needed was a follow-up to that statement in January, showing us where these measurements and these metrics were put in place. So that's what I was having this expectation, not that it's this work in progress, and now that it may come into play because of a biennial budget. This was something that was supposed to be addressed months and months ago, that was in the planning from the previous council, that you were working on performance metrics and working towards that. And we asked you in the first meeting, when will we see that update? Now we're saying we're going to get an email after we have to vote on this to go and see where these performance metrics may come into play for departments, for other parts of the city's function. That's the part where I'm not understanding. We asked for that. We asked for that update, we never got it. So now it's critical that we have to go into a forecast kind of crystal ball mode for budgeting. And I can agree why it would be beneficial, but without realizing what our performance metrics are and the totality of those. And it's not just because the auditor came in and said these work and these don't. You are going to take a comprehensive look at that. And again, anyone else who was at the meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, that was something we asked for as an update, and that was not provided. So now we're talking about adding it after the fact, after we go forward with this. This is something completely different. But if we need performance metrics around the totality of the way the city is run, that hasn't been provided yet.
Well, and Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, is the performance measures the totality of how the city is run?
Not financially, the way you sold it to us in January. So this was a statement you made that we now have performance metrics in place. It doesn't, it goes beyond just the finance of the city. It's for the management and day-to-day ops of the city. That was not provided. So, if we need to go into a department at a level of understanding their budgets, we would have to know whether or not they're meeting their performance on several levels and not just on the financial level. So that's the disconnect. You had mentioned that it was complete or inferred that it was complete, and we had asked for an update. We were told that there would be an update, and there has yet to be an update. So that is why I'm asking you. We said that in January. There was no update.
And I don't recall saying that there was going to be a specific update, but like I said, I'm happy to talk about this with you guys in any time between when you asked that question and now. But as I said, if you check your inbox, there's actually a meeting that is requested or suggested that you guys sit down and have a conversation where you go over what the auditor's data and assessment was, which, it wasn't too flattering. It calls out a need for change. And this was something that was a huge initiative for me, and it's still very important. We had a big management change, and Ted is here now, and he's leading this effort. I've never said that it was completed. In fact, it's an ongoing process, and it's going to be iterative, and it's going to be done over time, and I don't think it will ever be perfect. But the auditor's office, as I've shared before, has come in. They've done training. We've developed plans that actually have priorities and performance measures. By no means are they perfect, and I'd be glad to share that with you. And but I think the most important part right now is that you look at the auditor's assessment of it, and you look at what we've done, and we can talk about how to improve organizational effectiveness. But it's not anywhere close to being completed. But we're making significant progress, and like I said, we're doing this in phases to change. A city that's been around since becoming a town in 1906 and a little company town. It's going to take a while to change the culture and change the history, but everything that you're talking about is important. I share that same value, but it's going to take all of us improving the organizational effectiveness together. And like I said, we'd be glad to share that information. And there's a meeting that actually will give you the opportunity to dive into that a little bit more. Plus, every Tuesday or Thursday, I'd be glad to meet with you if this is something that is a burning desire of yours.
It was something you promised is deliverable. So to have me come back and remind you, maybe I can do that. But at this point, it was something that you had committed to in January.
Well, then I apologize if I committed to that, and we're following up now, and I'm glad that you did schedule time to go over that. Councilmember Gaston.
Thank you for collecting the information on this. I have some concerns with the forecasting, and after seeing the pros and cons on there, I'm even more concerned. I'm not sure that we've demonstrated success in long-term projections and forecasting. So I do echo some of Councilmember Gorski's statements, and I'm concerned, being a new council member, having not been through the budget process, I would prefer to table this until Councilmember Westman and Councilmember Trotter are available to participate in the discussion and vote. I don't know if that's an option at this point in the discussion. I would value their input is what I'm saying.
Okay, I can check with the auditor's office and see if we can delay it so you can talk with them. Is that what you're looking forward to have a conversation with them?
I feel that we have two council members missing, and I value their input in discussion. There's 3 of us that have not been through a budget process, and I don't feel that this is the right time for us to move into a biennial budget. However, I would like to hear the input from the other 2 council members. If we can't do that, we can vote tonight, that's fine.
And Sandy, I'll look for your thoughts on the timing of things. You know, but just in fairness to the people that are not here, I mean, I get that vacations come up and storm games come up, but the reality is, when we said we were going to move in this direction, we agreed to, we provided information, we provided an overview, we had a first discussion, and we said we, you know, bring it forward for consideration tonight, and whether people can or can't be here. I respect that, but at the same time, I think it's important to still keep trying to move forward. But Sandy, do you have any insights on questions or timing, and Councilmember East has a question?
Just to reiterate your comments, Mayor, about the person not being able to check with the state auditor's office tonight, that there is a need for us to get this adopted under rules to move forward into a timing of preparing a budget, to be able to let staff know whether they should be preparing a 1-year or a 2-year budget. Moving into August, to make a decision, they would have already had, you know, a good chunk of their done budget projected and prepared by the time we would get to the first meeting in August, which is not until like August 12th. So there would already be things that would normally be due from around that point.
I do have an additional question.
Councilmember East, can you chime on for quickly so that she can continue and then just click right back on?
Thank you. I forgot I made a note regarding software issues. It sounded as if you were concerned that the present software the city is using might not be streamlined for a biennial budget. And would there need to be a software change if we were to pass that?
No, I don't have any concerns. It can handle a 2 annual budgets just fine, and I believe the extended budgeting option in there would be able to handle a biennial budget as well. I don't have any concerns about the current software.
She was just acknowledging that the system that Walla Walla uses is different than the system that we are, but the functionality is the same. Councilmember East.
Sure, I'm ready to move this forward. I've listened to the information. Thank you for providing it, and I've thought about the process and my experience sitting out there and what I anticipate that it's going to be like. Well, I haven't been through one. I'm ready to vote on it today.
What thoughts? Well, a motion's been made and seconded. We're in discussion. Is there any further discussion? If not, then we'll call for the vote. Aaron, will you do a roll call vote, please?
This is voting in favor or opposed, so aye.
In favor of the motion.
In favor of the motion. So Councilmember Coffey?
Aye.
Councilmember Quartz?
Aye.
Councilmember Eastep?
Nay.
Councilmember Gassick?
Nay.
Councilmember Gorski?
Nay.
Motion fails 3-2.
Motion fails 3-2. Next up on the docket is a resolution to warehouse regarding street tree issues.